every once in a while you get one of those interviews that you just blows your mind. And this interview, it wasn't technical, even though this interview is with David Richter, the CEO and founder of Simple CFO. And he wrote the book called Profit First for Real Estate Investing. And guys, what he's about to share, I would say in my entrepreneurial forays, being an entrepreneur for over a decade and a half, almost 17 years, believe it or not. Started when I was 15. And that's not a joke. That's actually when I started. This is the number one thing that entrepreneurs, hard charging, go-getter entrepreneurs do not understand. And it is so important that you understand numbers. But this conversation, if anything, will hopefully just inspire you. It's not your eyes will not glaze over on this conversation. We keep it relevant. We keep it strong. We keep it really focused on how these concepts of profit first can help you become a better entrepreneur. So enjoy this episode. Please share it with someone that you think might need to hear this information. And thanks for supporting the show. Dude, welcome. Thanks for being on.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, let's rock and roll. So tell us a little bit about yourself. But I think more specifically, what I want to ask is, you've authored this book called Profit First, and specifically, I think a lot of people in my community are familiar with the Profit First model, but you have this niche where you dive deep into how it relates to real estate investors. And so I'm really curious, how did you get into that? What about that caught your attention? Why did you decide to niche down on that specifically?
Yeah. So a little bit of the backstory. I have been in real estate since 2012, bought my first property then, after reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad, had to take some action. But then from there, I hooked up with a real estate company that was doing about 5 wholesale deals a month. So they were already doing a pretty good, decent amount of business. Then my tenure there over 5 years, we scaled to about 25 deals a month between wholesale, turnkey, short-term rentals, long-term rentals, like lots of different things. So I got a lot of experience, but that's where I also got to sit in a lot of different seats, and from acquisition, disposition, transaction coordination. My last seat, though, was the finance seat at that company. So I learned all about profit and loss balance sheet because I have no background in finance or accounting or CPA or anything like that, but literally just school of hard knocks and sitting with the company's CPA and saying, okay, teach me. Like, what do I need to enter and how do I do this stuff? But that's where I learned we were doing 25 deals a month, but spending 26 worth. And it's like, that sucks. Like, we're making $1 million, but spending 1.1 to get there. Like, okay, what's happening? So that to me was eye-opening once I learned how to read the business's numbers in the story. But then I was going to mastermind events too. If you're in the real estate world, you've probably heard of a mastermind, if not already attended one. And it's like, we were going to those events and I was hearing other people say the same thing. Like, we're making millions of dollars, but we have no cash, or like, where did it all go? Or like, why don't I feel successful? And that's where I realized it's just an epidemic. People can make money, but they have a hard time keeping it because it's two different skill sets, making it and keeping it. So that's where I saw that as a epidemic. So that was my first eye opening. But then I moved across the country through a series of events, started working with another one of my friends in the real estate space, and his numbers were a mess because I asked him, like, show me your numbers, show me what's happening, because that really is all that matters. And I looked at it and they were a mess, like most people. They didn't know what the bookkeeper was doing. They were doing it wrong, all that stuff. Went in there, cleaned it up and for him, and just gave him clarity, just what he was making, spending, and keeping. And he told me this has been life-changing just to get the clarity there, because I can make decisions from numbers now versus just what I thought was best. And now I know where my cash is, and if it's tied up. He did a big refinance, put a lot of his money back into his pocket. Like, he had poured like lots of, like, over 70% of his own money. Like, he had 30% loan to value and 70% equity in like his whole portfolio. So he's like, okay, that's where my money went. And that's where he told me this has been life changing. That's where I started my company, Simple CFO. And through that, one of my mentors said you should read the book Profit First as like to add on to what you're doing and giving clarity. So that's how I even got introduced to that concept in that book, because I read that book in one night, took 10 pages of notes and said, this is it. This is what gives me the clarity, because even though I didn't have this big financial background and I'm more of like the school of hard knocks, it spoke to me as that entrepreneur of, I understand this. This is simple, and it's about telling my dollars where to go. And like every entrepreneur is going to do this, no matter if they know how to read a P&L or a balance sheet, profit and loss or whatever. And so I said, this is great. So we started implementing that framework with clients and business. And that's where about a year into that and having success and seeing entrepreneurs actually see the light and keeping more of the money, I reached out to Mike Mikowicz, the original author, and said, I'd like to write Profit First for real estate investing, because I have a heavy real estate background. I know that there's a lot that's very specific to the real estate industry, and I'm getting a lot of real estate specific questions on this journey of how Profit First applies to real estate. So that's how, there's the roundabout way of how I got connected, my background in real estate, and then Profit First, how that came to be.
And you're not a newbie at real estate, right? Like you said already, but you've done over 850 transactions yourself. So you really understand this game and how it relates. And then obviously being in the masterminds and being in these environments, you really recognize like you said, it's an epidemic. People don't know their numbers. So for someone listening to this that hasn't heard of the Profit First concept, could you introduce it at a high level so that when you say those words, people kind of understand what you're talking about and what you mean? I think that would be really valuable.
I love this part, because most people already have heard of Profit First. Even if you've never heard of that book or the concept, if you are listening to this, you've probably read Rich Dad Poor Dad. You might have read some other books that are very popular in the personal finance or in the business space, like The Richest Man in Babylon or The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Like those are big time books, international bestsellers. And in all those books, they say the same things. Pay yourself first. They say a portion of all you have is yours to keep. Or in the 7 Habits book, he says, put first things first. That's the whole concept of Profit First. In a for-profit business needs to make sure profit is the first thing, because the purpose of the business is to be profitable. And the way that they've formulated in the book is with the formula, which is great for the real estate community, because real estate investors love their formulas. So the old formula that everyone crams down our throat as business owners is sales minus expenses equals profit. I make a sale, I pay everyone else and their mother, and hopefully at the end of the day or the year, or when I sell my company, or like one day in the future, I'm going to have this profit that I can actually take and do something with, where Profit First just flips around that formula and says, no, it's sales minus profit equals expenses. I make a sale, I take my profit first and make sure I'm protecting my business and myself. And then the expenses are still there, but they're there as a secondary part to make sure I can still grow the business, but I have the profit there of what I wanted. So that's the concept and the mindset. But I tell people, you've heard that before in all those different books. That is just another fancy way of saying pay yourself first, or like any of those other books I was talking about. And I tell people what drove me to Profit First and what the follow-up is, where all those other books tell you to pay yourself first. Profit First goes one step further and said, this is how you do it. It gives a framework, like practical steps of this is what you do, and it's built off the envelope method. And I could dive into that, but the practical side is you set up physical bank accounts and name them different things to make sure you're more profitable and you're telling your money where to go. But that's the high level overview of Profit First, which if you've heard of those other books, you've probably already heard that concept. The next step though is there's practical steps to make sure you are profitable from every deal, transaction, sale that happens, no matter your business, because it's more of a financial principle and financial wealth habit than it is like a real estate specific topic or whatever. It's all businesses can apply the foundation of the whole system.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. So you're saying, what I hear you saying, and what I want the audience to take away is like, hey, we've heard this principle before. Maybe our parents taught us if they were good with money. Maybe maybe our grandparents, maybe someone in our family was good with money, mentioned something about this. But Profit First is the how. It is the implementation of that concept. And based on the envelope or bank account method, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, that's brilliant. And that's what you guide people through. So it's like, here's the how, let's break it down to a baby step. Anybody can do this, right?
Right.
So, you mentioned, I want to rewind for a second because you just mentioned that there are two different skills that you need to have in business. You mentioned you need to make money and then you need to keep money. And you literally said those are two completely different skills, which I agree 100% with. And I've seen this in my own life. So, to make money, there's marketing skills you have to have. You need to have some sales skills. You need to be able to communicate to the marketplace what you're doing. You need to be able to close the deal. All right, you close the deal, someone writes you a check for 10K, 5K, 2K, 1K, doesn't matter, but you get the money. So there's certain skills, and we could talk about that, but that's kind of beyond the purview of this podcast with you. I want to talk about what are the skills that someone needs to have to keep money. Like if someone's listening to this and they're like, okay, I get it, I can make it, which someone listening to this probably can make it. What do people need to develop in themselves in order to have that skill of now being able to keep it?
One of the things that drove me to Profit First was its simplicity. I feel like it's the first baby step. It's like when a dollar comes in, how do I divide up that dollar? And that's where it gives you a framework to say, okay, here's $1,000 that came in. What's the percent towards profit and paying myself? And what's the percent to put back in the company to make sure another $1,000 comes in tomorrow or next week? So that's where, for me, Profit First was like the first step. And that's like getting your cash in order, because every entrepreneur, no matter what, they're going to manage the money. You know why? Because all that takes is a bank account. And most people have one big bank account where money comes in, money goes out. They've got the big black hole account and money just goes in and out and they have no idea what's happening. That's one form of money management. It's not the best and it's guaranteed to give you anxiety. But that's where, if you as an entrepreneur are just managing like that, I have money today, I'll spend it. I don't have money today, I'll be frugal. Or oh shoot, I feel like I'm on fire. What do I need to do? It's like Profit First to me was the first step, because anyone can do it at any level. And it's very simple because it's built for the entrepreneur. Then past that, if you want to say, okay, but I want to learn more about being a financially savvy business owner, because a business owner, if you are the owner of a business, you've got the 4 pillars, right? You've got marketing, sales, operations, and finance. If you want to learn just the high levels of that, the financial piece is, how do I read the P&L, the profit and loss, the balance sheet, and the cash flow statement? Actually learning how to do that. And I like to recommend the book, I think it's Accounting for the Number Phobic. It's such a great book. It puts it on the bottom shelf for entrepreneurs. So I really like that book. Also, that's why I even started Simple CFO, because a lot of people have bookkeepers, CPAs, but they all speak accountanese. They all speak the language of accounting, but most entrepreneurs don't. So it's getting someone in your life who can speak business owner, but can also translate the accounting, methodology, all the jargon and all that crap, and being able to say, this is what you really need to know. So I'd sometimes getting someone on your team to guide you and train you on that side as well too. But there's also books, like I said, like that one book is really great. It just puts it on the bottom shelf of, what does a P&L mean? How do I read the balance sheet? And how is it important to my business? But it's like taking yourself on that journey, and you don't need to be the expert. You don't need to be the expert. I literally had a call today with one of our CFOs, with one of our most successful clients. And this client came to us and said, had no financial knowledge whatsoever, was paying herself randomly, random draws and a very small salary, didn't know what was happening. And after a year of deep diving, of saying, here's Profit First, here's the baby steps to setting up these accounts, and then just learning and understanding the importance of the profit and loss, the balance sheet, and what those numbers represent. Now she is a numbers queen. She tracks everything. She makes sure she has budgets in her business, making sure that she knows exactly where every dollar's going. And she literally grew her profit in 1 year 338%. From
Wow.
1 year to the next, it was crazy, because I was going over and I'm like, show me this, show me her numbers. And so she was pulling them up, and it was crazy, just because when you focus on something, it expands. And that's where most people just don't know the baby steps. What are the first steps? First, it's getting your cash under control, because cash is something we all manage no matter what, whether you know how to read a profit and loss or not. Then the second thing to become more savvy is, how are these numbers affected on these different financial reports, and how do I make decisions from these numbers, and what are the questions to ask? So it's a book like Accounting for the Number Phobic, or getting a financial coach in your life or something like that, because even though you don't have to be the expert, you have to be savvy enough to know what's going on. Then another practical step is a bookkeeper. So you need your numbers there. The worst thing you could do is have no numbers in your business. Those are literally the story your business is telling you. And your business is either screaming, help me, or like, hey, it's on the right track. You should pour more fuel into this fire, like the marketing channel that's really helping you. So it's like, that's where we got to get the right people around us. But there's a couple first steps right there. Make sure, number one, you get like a simple profit first type system in place. You are learning the basics, the fundamentals, like finance 101 of how do I even read these statements, and then getting the right people on your team. Those would be some first steps that you could do just to educate yourself. And honestly, reading the profit first book, you read it the first time, it's like, it's going to be eye-opening and it's simple. You'll get the concept. So I'm not saying you should take this big accounting course or anything. It's like, these are just the bare bones, become more financially savvy in your business life.
Yeah. And for somebody, so what I hear you saying is like, hey, you don't have to change who you are. If you're an entrepreneur and you're a go-getter and you're a hard charger, like go be a hard charger, go make money. But this is a piece that you have to delegate to someone, you know, that you trust and that knows it. And you have to have a high level understanding of it to be able to ask, as you said, the right questions.
The right questions.
So don't just hands off this section like a lot of entrepreneurs do.
Yeah.
What are the benefits, man? Pitch me for a second. Not that you have to pitch me, but pitch the listeners on like, okay, because look, I mean, I'll be honest. I think of myself as a numbers guy, but some of the level of detail that you're talking about, it's like, oh, like my eyes can glaze over, man. If I'm not buying another house, like my eyes just glaze over a little bit. I'm like, this isn't a house, you know, and I like buying houses, but what are the benefits when someone does get this under control? What unlocks in my life? What am I able to do now that I couldn't do earlier? Like, talk to me about maybe some of your, like what you just gave me one great example, like profit expanded because she focused on it. Now she knew what it was. Like if someone's here is making $100,000 a year, like, would you like to make $338,000 a year? That's a 338% increase, right? Like that's what you just shared. But like, maybe talk to us a little bit more about why people have to really dive in and get this under control.
Well, I would say number one, the biggest thing is like what Warren Buffett says is, you know, like number one of rule of money in general, don't lose money. And number two, refer to rule number one. So many people have so much money going out the door, or they are in for a rude awakening that they don't even know. That we like to stick our head in the sand as entrepreneurs. Like you said, our eyes glaze over, but that does not stop facts from being facts. If your company is going under and you are underperforming and your numbers suck, that does not stop you from going out of business just because you say, oh, I'm just going to sell more. Usually that creates, you go from a 6-figure problem of money to a 7-figure problem. And then from 7 to 8, it's like more money, more problems. You're just compounding the root problem. I would also say too, that's one of the biggest things to stay away from. But one of the biggest benefits is once you know your numbers, you can tie them to what your purpose is. The purpose of the business is to be profitable. But your purpose, just like one of our other clients, his purpose is to spend more time with family and to give to charity because he likes to give and he's a very aggressive giver. He's a go-giver. So that's where in his life, once he knew the numbers, he came to us in debt, like lost $70,000 like the year before that we talked together, and was like just spinning his wheels saying, I hate real estate. But like through the course, we told him, number one, why are you in this business and what do you really need from it? He had gotten on the same train as everyone else. Ooh, I'm going to these mastermind events. I want to do 25 deals a month like David or like all these other people. Like I want to scale, but that was their only reason. They didn't look at their business as what is specific to me and what will give me the life I want today and what I want with my family. Like that guy was working 70, 80, 90, 100-hour weeks, not spending a lot of time with his family, not making the money. He wasn't paying himself. He had rentals and flips, wasn't paying himself from the flips. It's like he was just in a downward spiral. But like getting a grasp on his numbers, we took him through what we call your keep number process of like, what do you need to keep from your business? And what is that number that's specific to you? And to him, once he found what he even needed just for himself, he tied it to how many properties he needed to buy that next year. And that's where it was life-changing for him, because where he had tried to do 3 to 4 deals a month the year before and lost all that money, and he said, I did more deals than I've ever done and lost more money than I've ever lost. The next year, he said, I only need to do 5 deals. I only need to do 5 deals to get to my number because I know our profit per deal and how many I need to do in the flip company. So I don't have to keep stealing from my rentals. I don't have to keep going into the hole. And it's like, this is how many I need to do. To him, that was more time freedom. That was more, he didn't have to work the 80, 90, 100 hour weeks. It gave him peace of mind almost instantly just knowing that number. Like, what did he need and what did it equate to properties and the volume that he needed to do? That's one of the biggest of benefits, is just being able to tie your purpose to the actual numbers behind the scenes. Because if you go to a meeting, I bet you why most people, your eyes and why most people's eyes glaze over in financial meetings, because the person that they're talking with never equates it to what this really means for their bigger picture. How do the numbers here today equate to my why, where I'll be able to get closer to it? Fast forward 3 years now, where this guy's been on Profit First, implemented it, knows his numbers of where he is every single day and every single week. Now, last year, he filled up all his Profit First accounts, like to be able to run his business by June. He called me in June and said, I filled it up. I don't need to do another deal this year to be able to run my business. And it's like, that's a years of building good wealth habits, knowing all the numbers. And he called me in June, said, I don't need to do another deal, but he's like, I'm still going to. But in August, he took 3 weeks off. He took 3 weeks off with his family, did an RV road trip, and that helped him fulfill one of his whys, like spending time with his kids when they're young. Like, that's a big benefit. And then last year, he gave $70,000 to a camp for kids, a charity. And I called him because he sent me that in a text message for him. And I said, do you realize the significance of that number? He's like, yeah, it's a big number. I'm like, remember 3 years ago when you lost 70,000? You just gave 70,000 from one account and didn't touch profit or your pay or the taxes or the expenses. And he's like, "Oh, Dane, yeah, that's incredible." And that's where I'm like, that's why I try to get people to understand this, because if you find that you are hurting, like you make money but feel broke, so many people in the entrepreneur space feel like that. But once you start to learn what the numbers mean, you can start to affect those numbers. You can go into sniper mode. That's where you can attack the problems. You can attack the things, and we're problem solvers, right? As entrepreneurs, this just helps you ask the right question. So there's some of the benefits, some of the pitfalls. Stop losing money, stop losing your shirt. And then number 2, making sure that if you have these systems in place, it's getting you to why you even started your business, where a lot of people never equate that. I will also say here as a sidebar, you had said like, hey, if you're an entrepreneur, you don't need to change. You don't need to, be this person like this accounting expert. And I would 100% agree with that. It's also the knowledge gap is so much shorter than you think it is. Just because a CPA or bookkeeper comes in with this fancy language and talks all this jargon, they think they're way over here and way above you and can speak all this. And honestly, we're just trying to shorten that gap so you can become a savvy business owner. It's really easy once you know the step-by-step of like, here's just simple steps of managing the money and the cash. Here's the simple way to read the profit and loss and the balance sheet. Like, so that way you understand. It's like everyone thinks it's a huge knowledge gap, and that's what keeps them from those benefits and those pitfalls, that I was talking about. So I'm like, it's really a short gap, just learning those things. Then we can utilize the numbers for those, stop going out of business and start actually thriving, and why we started our business.
Wow. Man, so much. First of all, all of that is pure gold. I hope people stop, replay that, put that on repeat, like pure gold. And what I hear you saying, one of my favorite inspirational speakers always says that clarity is power. It's like his little mantra, like clarity is power. And so much of what I hear you saying is, clarity. Just that alone would change an entrepreneur's life who doesn't have clarity on that, because you get to pull things apart. I remember this one situation. It came to my mind as you were talking, where someone asked me one time, this was probably 10 years ago now, maybe 12 years ago. He said, what does it cost to live your dream life? And I had no idea, but I wanted to sound like I knew. So I was like, 400,000 a month. I'm like, I don't remember exactly the number. It was like some crazy number, right? I was just like, I don't know, like my dream life, it's probably a lot. And he's like, are you sure? And he like just kind of questioned me for a second. And I was like, yeah, think so. Are you sure? He's like, I want you to go home tonight. I want you to write out everything. And this is really just more a story about clarity, right? And write out everything, write out what the payments would cost on that car, on that beach house, on that man. And like, I couldn't get above, like, at this time of my life, now I could do higher now, but at this point I couldn't get above like 40K a month. I was like, I don't know. That's like the car. It's like 3 houses, one on the ocean, one on the... And it just helped me. It really reinforced what I feel like you're so much about, which is like when you have clarity, you're not just there spinning your wheels for no reason, which so many of us do as entrepreneurs, super guilty of that. Like more just equals more because more is better. It's kind of what we're taught to understand. And so, why, this is a little bit of a sidebar question. I wasn't planning on asking it actually, but like, why are so many entrepreneurs, I mean, you deal with these people all the time. So like, it's getting me to question, like, why are we like that? Like, why are we like more is better, period? When the truth is I might need 6 deals, the right deals, and then that might be everything I need, like based on my goals. Any thoughts on that question? It's like an emotional question. Not trying to take this away from the numbers, but why is that just a personality thing, or in your experience, where does that come from?
Oh, yeah. Here we go. Here's the can of worms, because the emotional side, money is emotional. So it's like you say, taken away from that. Well, no, when we work with people, like, it's very emotional because a lot of people have garbage from their past. It could be parents, how they were raised. If they didn't have good examples, if they had no example of money and like what to be taught. Also, too, just, okay, open up your phone right now. How many ads do you get bombarded with if you go on Facebook, Instagram, if you're in your email, if you're breathing, you're going outside, the billboards, it's like, especially in America, the American dream, the bigger car, keeping up with the Joneses, like even from back, that statement from way back when, it's like, that is how our civilization and our society is built, of more, more, more. We're recording this like right after Christmas. It's like, how many Christmas ads did you see for all the new stuff, the new toys, the new things, and they're marketing to everyone? And it's like, it's just our whole society is built like that, of more, more, more. And that's where so many people get caught up in that, where as a business owner, we take that in. And how does it manifest? More deals equals more money, and I'll be okay. As long as I just do one more deal, as long as that deal closes and doesn't get pushed back or whatever, we'll be fine. And that mentality is what keeps us stuck in the rat race, our own rat race in our life, because we're just force fed all the rat race of like, you should want more, you should want all this stuff, you should want the fancier stuff. Am I saying it's all wrong? No. But I'm saying there has to be a point where, like you said, getting clarity. Where am I at the stage of my life now? What do I really want from my life? And what does that really take? If I do want, $100,000 a month, am I willing to put the work in and time? Do I have a family? Do I not have a family? Do I have, people in my life that depend on me outside of this? Am I a part of, an organization and like a charity or something where that takes time too? So I can't give 100%, just to the business? Or are you like, no, I could give 100% here. I could go all in and I could just put my nose to the grind, and I can for the next 2 years, 3 years, just really blow this thing up and get to that level. It's like, you have to take that step back, but we're just force fed that a lot. That's how a lot of us have grown up. Or, we've got all these bad money mindsets that we're given, and some of them help and hurt us. It's like, money doesn't grow on trees. Like, how many of us heard that statement growing up from parents or people in our life? Yeah, exactly. Me too. It's like, we all hear those types of things, and it gives us different influences around money. And that sometimes motivates people of like, well, I'm just going to make so much that it doesn't matter if it grows on trees or not. I'm going to grow the money trees myself. Or like, people think they have the limiting beliefs, like money is scarce and now I can't go out there and do it. It's like, there's so many different factors, but I think ultimately it's just what is pumped into us on a daily basis. You should want more stuff, and that spills over where a lot of people in business have not gone through maybe a personal finance course or haven't had any financial education. And if you don't have anything whatsoever, you're just going with the best, your best money mindsets that you've got up to that point. And if you haven't had any, it's like, well, this sounds good today, I think I'll do it, or I'll spend the money, or like everyone says, just to spend more money, right? And then it'll come back, and it's just playing Russian roulette with your own money and finances. So I think those are some of the reasons why we get stuck in our own rat race as entrepreneurs, and why we just keep going on that income train.
So is it a recommendation? I want to break this down to an action step for the audience that I think could be helpful, but if you think this, like, is part of, let me back up here for a second. I think I encounter more people now than I feel like I used to. And maybe this is because I'm traveling more. So I'm meeting like Westerners that are in like other countries. And then like the conversation that a lot of times ensues is pretty much what you just shared, which is like, like a little bit of like fed up with this like capitalistic, not that it's anti-capitalism, but like, hey, like we get it in the West. It's just that more and more and more. It's the keeping up with the Joneses. And there's like a little, not distrust isn't the right word, but like kind of like satiation. Like, okay, been there, done that. So how does somebody snap out of that? So I guess what I'm trying to say is like, I encounter more people that are kind of in this boat of like, did the more and more and more thing, didn't work for me, but they're kind of like trying to figure out what is next. I mean, is it as simple as taking a week-long meditation and being like asking those questions you want? I mean, how would you coach someone out of that mentality that's kind of in that, like, okay, go figure out what you want, go write it down, go put the costs next to it, and then let's come to someone like you and let's get clear on is that it? Is that the process? Is that the action item for someone who's maybe listening to this and they're like, man, I get what you're saying? Because I'll be honest, man, I'm listening to you talk right now and I'm personally feeling like the things you're sharing. I'm like, oh, I feel that for me. Like, that's what I'd like. My wife will regularly say to me, so Sam, when is enough? And I'll be like, I have no answer for her. I do not have an answer for her. I'm just like, I don't know. Like, and I just set a bigger goal, right? I put a bigger jet. Like I've got a Falcon 50 on my wall. I'm like, well, I don't know. I don't even know how much that costs, but it's just there because it's like the thing to do, right?
Yeah.
But so to bring this down, I'm rambling a little bit, but to bring this down to something, if someone's listening to this and saying, okay, cool, I'm a little dissatisfied with that machine. And there's a lot of those. I mean, I'm 32 and there's a certain piece of me that's dissatisfied with that. How do I break out of that? Like, yes, know my numbers, but how do I break out of that mentality? What do I do to get that clarity for me?
What we tell people, and when I go out and speak, I always tell them the number one thing is like what we did with that guy that I was telling you about before. His name was Joey, for that client, that we get very clear. That clarity, again, it's really sitting down and how much do you really need? Why is that? You know, I have a little form like at the end here, if you want, I give this form of like, here's the profit first cheat sheet. And one of them is how to find your keep number. It's 6 questions. Like, it should be simple. You should go through it with your spouse and like be on the same page with money, because it's not when you get to a certain point, you realize it's not about the money, but it's about the how we interact with everything in our life. I've taken profit first, not just in the money sense, but in my calendar. What matters to me during the week? I want to put time with my wife and daughter on there before I put in work. And I want to put working out. Where's working out going to be in there? Because I want my health to be good, and I want to be here for a long time. And I have to make sure if I have speaking engagements or I have things like that, that is on the calendar, but my priorities are right. So it's like, what really matters to me, and where am I? This is the key question though. Where am I in this stage of life? What have I committed to? If I have a wife and a daughter, then I've committed to them. I do not want, I heard this statement, this kicked me in the rear. I want to make sure I really am doing it for them. Like a lot of entrepreneurs say, I'm doing this for them instead of to them. But a lot of entrepreneurs do it to their spouses and to their children. So it's like getting them on the page with you. Okay, I'm going to be traveling this much. This is what it would bring in an income. And this is where I think we can be. Is this what is going to fulfill us as a family this year? I could spend every week traveling, busting my butt, just going out on the road, but I've got a family. I don't want to do that to my 7-year-old little girl. I don't want to do that to my wife. And it's like, I am where I am at this stage of life, but I want to make sure that my priorities are lined up. So those questions are like, how much do you need to support your lifestyle as it stands today? And what are those things in your life? Like, what is important to you? And some people call that vision and goal planning, and there are a lot of different ways that people spin it, your why, your purpose, all that different type of stuff. But it's really getting very clear on where I am in the stage of life, because things change. Just because right now you might have a young kid at home, or you've got, people that are out of your, grown and out of your house, it doesn't matter. It's more of, where am I now? If I've got young kids at home, then I don't want to be gone as much. But if I've got older teenagers or people or grown adult children, well, then I probably can travel a lot more, and I can probably make more, or I can be smarter with what I'm doing with my, with the time that I have here. But like, when it just depends of where you are in that stage of life. But I would. Those first steps is, like you said, get clarity on what that means for me today. And are the people that I've chosen to put in my life okay with this? What do you have a mentor you would run it by? Would you, like, if people work with us, running it by your CFO, like, does that make sense? And do we think we can actually achieve that with this business without me being gone 70, 80, 90, 100 hour, a week? Do I have the right people in place? And if I were to hire them, what does that mean? And what does that mean to the bottom line, so I can put that in dollars and cents? And that's where getting that clarity, like we talked about, is now specific to you. Just most people pick a number out of their rear and just say, oh, that sounds good. And, like, that's what I'm wanting to do. But they don't tie it to where I am in this stage of life. And if 5 years from now, what does that look like? If I have a 7-year-old daughter now, what does 12 years old look like? Does that look like I'm traveling more for myself, or does it mean I'm traveling more and putting her in different things and extracurricular things, and I want to be there for soccer games or volleyball or like the different things that might be going on then? So it's like, okay, how do I set that up now for then as well too? So it's just getting clear on who you are and where you are in your stage of life, and tying that to the money. That's where it could give you that stories after story of, that's why once entrepreneurs learn how to keep the money and what those numbers are, it's a lot easier then to plan, to be able to say, what could I really do with what I've built and the engine I have? Then you can ask yourself those better questions. Is my engine really serving me? Is this the right engine? Do I need to pivot? Is there better things out there where it's like I could have a better life, just a better quality of life every day? Like, are you commuting? Are you not commuting? Is there like stuff that's eating up your life right now that you hate? And how can we get out of that? And if you're an entrepreneur specifically, are your numbers really supporting where you want to be? And if not, how do we get there to that goal? So it's getting very clear on where you are.
Wow. Yeah. And what I hear you also kind of saying is like tying it to lifestyle. It's like lifestyle design, not just money design.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Because money provides something. It gives you something, it gives you a lifestyle.
Yeah.
Man, would you define for people what, and maybe silly question, but would you define for people what keep number means to you? You've mentioned that a couple of times, and like keep number. And then is it possible to go through those 6 questions? Like, share them?
I will need to pull them up, but I usually just give that at the end. I'll give that to everyone here, so you can go and do that homework on your own. I'd like for you guys to go out there and get that worksheet. It's just a worksheet, and I do a walkthrough video. But to me, the keep number is very simply, what do you need to bring home every month to support your current lifestyle? And like, that is your keep number. And then I break it down even one step further, need and want. What is your need number? Like, are you sucking air right now? And you're like that client that I was talking about before, barely taking draws when you need to and barely paying yourself. We got to get you just out of your rat race. What would help you just break even every month that you're bringing home, where you don't have to feel like, can I get groceries this week? Like, do I need to take an extra draw for that? So that's the first thing. Then your want number would be more like what you were talking about. Oh, I thought it was 400,000, but it's more like 40,000 right now. And I can see that end goal by next year or the end of this year, or like, that's intangible want number. And then you get to that point and you're like, okay, do I want to up that, or do I really like life right now? And, my, daughter, my son, or like, I've got the different things going on. It depends on where you are in that stage. But keep number to me is the money you need to bring home for your current lifestyle. And then you break it down into need and want. What helps me stop sucking air? And then what gets me excited about life and the life I really want to live?
Wow. That's brilliant, man. Yeah, so many more questions for you. We're at 37 minutes. I was like, wait. I didn't even ask the questions that were written on my sheet. Man, pure gold. I feel of all, I've had some great guests on here. I just had Brandon Turner on here. I had 9-figure entrepreneur David Osborne on here. David Green. This is my favorite episode by far. Like, and I'm not just, I've never said that to anybody else before, but like, this is where the rubber meets the road. This is actually why we say we do everything we do. It's for the dollars that provide us something. And there's such a huge disconnect between, what it is and what it's actually providing us and what we actually have. It's crazy. So I love the niche that you're serving in the market. It's just, it's huge. But I want to ask this one more question, man, maybe 2 more. And that is, when you first work with an entrepreneur and you start to implement this profit first strategy, what are the hurdles or things that you start to bump up to? And what I'm trying to do is kind of like maybe overcome some of those right now in people's minds. Like, I'm sure there's got to be some sort of pattern or theme to the things that you hit up to, because how you describe it in this podcast is pretty simple, man. Like, and I love that it's simple. It's like, hey, you put your money here, you take your profit out first, you have a different formula. But what are those hurdles that you maybe the top 2 or 3 hurdles that you kind of bump up against people, and how do you overcome them as you begin to work with somebody and implement this system?
We have to meet everyone where they are. So a lot of people come with stinking thinking when it comes to their money. They're on usually one extreme side of the fence. They're an extreme saver, extreme spender. They either don't want to spend any money or they want to spend all of it all the time. They say they're the risk taker. I'm the entrepreneur. That's what we do. They identify with that. So sometimes we have to say, making money, you have learned that skill. You have mastered that skill. You are the man. You are the woman. It's like, you are awesome at doing this. I want to teach you the discipline of keeping money. And it's like, we have to take them down and say, I know money's emotional. I know you've never handled it like this, but we've got to break down some of these barriers in your mind so that way we can take you through to be able to fully grasp what this system is doing for you. So sometimes it is that emotional side of money. So that's one barrier. Another one is they're scared. They are scared to look at their numbers. They're scared to look at the finances. Usually they've got a bookkeeper, but like they don't really manage them at all. And like they don't ever look at the numbers. And it's like, we got to say, are you prepared to look at the numbers? Because even if they're bad, I'm going to help you get to a better position. Then we can get you to where you want to be. But a lot of people never make that connection because they don't have someone holding their hand. Usually it's just that bookkeeper who's doing a crappy job, who they never meet with, and that bookkeeper doesn't care. They're just putting transactions in some system like QuickBooks. So it's like, that's another hurdle, is getting over that fear and making sure that they're not scared to learn this stuff. I would say another one is, and for profit first, for how simple it is, it's like it takes some work to set up. Like you have to invest some time on the financial side, like understanding, okay, we're going to open up some bank accounts, we're going to name them, and then every time, like at least once a week, we're going to transfer money and make sure that your money and every dollar is going where it needs to go. And some people don't want to set up the accounts, or they don't want to, they're like, oh man, like I just go make more money? And I'm like, that's the symptom of the problem, of the root problem that is getting you to why you're living and why you even, living in the rat race, and why you reached out to us. So that's another one, is some of those, just very simple hurdles, but it's a hurdle nonetheless in people's mind. Like, oh man, I've got to go open this up, or I've actually got to sit down and look at my finances on, a regular basis now, like weekly or bi-weekly. So those are some of the top ones. It's coming over mindsets. It's the big one is the fear of just looking at it. And really, like you said, my eyes glaze over. It's like, because they have never tied the money to the end result of their why, of why they started the company. So it's really helping people over that fear and then tying it to their why. And then some of the practical steps, getting some pushback on that. But it's like, once you set it up, it can take you 15 minutes a week. It's like, you got to do some of the upfront work to get it set up, like hiring a new employee. Well, now you've got a new system for your finances. It's like, let's set it up, the foundation right. And then now, if you're doing, 10 deals a year now, let's set up the foundation right now and get good habits in place. So when you're doing 100 deals, you've got the profitability habits already in place. So it's also future pacing, like what you're doing today also affects what you're doing, next year. So that's how we overcome some of those as well with people. But those are some of the biggest hurdles.
Yeah,
sure.
No, that's good. I can even tell a little story from my own life of last year. So 2023, I kind of overcame some of my fears to look at some of the numbers from my martial arts business. I ran a brick and mortar chain of martial arts schools. And it wasn't just this, but it was partly due to the fact that I kind of dug in deeper, because I'm no different than a lot of entrepreneurs. There's that fear there of like, okay, like let's look at the numbers, right? And what it led me to do when I got deeper into it was it led me to sell off the entire chain of brick and mortar schools, which made my life 10 times simpler and allowed me to focus on a coaching company that I was building that was just way more profitable, right? And I don't know if I hadn't looked at the numbers, if I hadn't deep dove into that, I'm not sure I would have sold off, and I still would be running a lot more than I am now. I still am running like a chicken with my head cut off, but like it would have been even more so with, 7 brick and mortar locations in 3 different states with 1,500 martial arts students and 30 employees. Like, that's a lot, right? And so recognizing, and I'm saying this because I want listeners to understand the power of what you're saying, even just from a small personal example for me of like, when you do get the clarity, when you overcome that fear and bring on a coach like yourself or somebody in that space, imagine, I get excited. It's like, wow, life could be totally different for you in a positive way if you decide not to just dabble as Tony Robbins would say, not to dabble in this area of life, but to truly master this area and bring or delegate the mastery of it, but understand it at a high level, like you've been saying. So yeah, brilliant, man. I want to ask you one more question, and this is a personal question, sort of personal, because I was with a friend recently and his business was not doing well at all. And he knew he was losing money, but he did not have maybe the best handle on his, on his numbers. But it was to the point to where he knew, if I don't do something different, radically different right away, like my business is probably going to fail and I'm gonna have to let everybody go. And that's a pretty emergency case scenario. And he was saying, like, he was getting a hard money loan at like 26% interest, or maybe it was more than that. Maybe it was like 36% interest now that I think about it. And what would you do in a situation like that progressed? It's like late stage cancer for a business. How do you go in? And I'm asking personally because I'm very curious. How do you assess that situation, and how would you handle that?
Before I even answer that, I say this a lot when I'm out, that most people don't lose sleep at night because they lose money. They don't know how much they're losing. So the first thing we have to do.
Say that again.
Most people don't just lose sleep at night because they're losing money. They lose the most sleep at night because they don't know how much they're losing. They don't have clarity, like what we've been hitting on this whole podcast. And in this situation, the first thing we have to do is get clarity. How much are you bleeding? Where's the bleeding coming from? Where can we stop it? Is there fuel we can add to the fire? Should we be pouring money into an area that will actually return us the fastest and best? Do we have assets that we need to sell off? There have been multiple clients that have walked through our door in triage, like, help me. I think I'm in this exact same scenario. And if they're in real estate, sometimes they have assets, like they've grown a portfolio. There was this one guy, he thought he was okay. He thought he was actually in the black, so he didn't think there was a fire. We go in there, give him clarity. He's $280,000 in the hole. And he's like, what the heck? And I'm like, it's because it was during COVID and stuff. Like, he was able to take EIDL, PPP money, and it's like it covered up all the sins. So he had money in the account, but it's like, you're dying. Like, you're dying. You need to get back to the black. And for him, it was selling off some of his rentals. And he was like crying because it's like, this is the portfolio that I built over years and stuff. And I'm like, do you want to keep this business, or do you want to sell everything and start something new? Because that's what you might be looking at, between these options. So he started selling some, and then he made some other decisions and moved things around and people and the different things he was doing, and was able to get back into the black. Because once you have clarity, you can attack the problem. One of my best friends in the CFO space says it's sniper mode. Once you have the clarity, you can go into sniper mode and say, is it a make, spend, or keep issue? Am I not making enough? Am I spending too much, or in the wrong areas, or like not where I should to get the return? Or am I not keeping what I want to? So usually it's those first two areas. If you're in triage, you're not either making enough or you're spending too much, or it's a combination of both. And we have to attack both at the same time if you're that far down the road. But if you don't know, and we don't know, that's the first thing we have to do. We have to get clarity, because then we know what to attack. So that's step number one. Then step number two is actually attacking. So it's like, you can't have a peacetime CFO or a peacetime CEO at that point. You need a wartime one to say, okay, it's going to get bloody. There's going to be blood in the streets here, but it's like, do you want to give it up? Or do you want to do some of the hard things that, because we didn't know the numbers up to this point, now we have to make these decisions? And I never want you to get here again. And that's when we have to go in and make sure that we're instilling the good habits, so they never also get back into the same scenario.
Yeah. So it's like putting most of us just put a Band-Aid over the check engine light when
That's a good analogy.
It's flashing. We know it. We're losing sleep because we know something's happening, but we don't want to face it or address it. Man, that's been the common theme, I think, of this podcast, is clarity, and at the same time facing that fear that a lot of us have of, let's dig in and let's find out what's actually going on. Very, 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 very powerful. What's the next step for someone? What's the next step for someone who wants to work with you, take the next step? I know you said you have some questions that you kind of get people to answer a form. I'd love for people to go to
simplecfo.com/gift. If you go there, you get my book, the whole ebook, audio book, so you can at least start listening to it. If you want the print book, it's on Amazon, but that's where I can get that to you immediately. But then also the Profit First cheat sheet. This would be the first steps. I don't care if you're at 1,000 deals or your first deal, you can do the first steps. because it's like finding your keep number. It's helping you set up like the actual profit first and like the different accounts we recommend and where to put the money. It's just giving you some very practical first steps that anyone can do, whether you are a financial wizard or if you are like, what the heck have you been talking about this whole time? It's like I can get you from at least to do the first step. That's why I did the cheat sheet. It's one page. It is just a few simple steps to start. And it's just a backup for if you don't read the full book, you can at least use these first steps to at least get the first, of profit first up and running. So simplecfo/gift, simplecfo.com/gift. Go there, you could download it. And then from on the second page, once you download it, you can schedule a call with our team. It's really not this high pressured sales call. It is really saying, if we're not a good fit, do you need a bookkeeper, a CPA? Like, what are the first things to help you on your financial journey if you have no idea what's going on? So we're just trying to assess your situation. Like, do you know what is going on in the business? You don't know what's going on. If you're newer, here's the first steps to take, that type of thing. Yeah, I've got socials. Just follow me on Instagram. It's like RichterScale91 on Instagram. On Facebook, just look up David Richter, there. And, those are the places I'm posting, and LinkedIn as well, too. So just trying to get this education out there as much as possible.
Well, man, I appreciate the passion you brought today. Thank you so much for being on. It was really an honor to kind of get to know you a little bit better through this and ask you some questions and just hear how passionate you are about sharing this message with people. It's definitely one that's needed out there. So here's to getting this message out to millions, man. Congrats and keep up the good work.
Thank you, Sam. I appreciate you having me on.
Well, what do you think? Did I disappoint? I hope not. To me, that was an inspiring episode. One of the great things about running a podcast, you get to have your action. Like, I've got my action items. It's funny. I was thinking very specifically as David was talking, I was thinking how many mindset coaches I have in my life. I've got a coach through the Tony Robbins organization. I've got, coaches in the real estate space. I've got coaches with the masterminds that I'm a part of. But I was thinking, like, do I have someone that's coaching me on my numbers? And I don't. Like, because I think of myself as like a pretty good numbers person, as you might do too. But it just made me realize that I need probably less mindset coaches. And maybe at this stage in my life, I've mastered a lot of mindset. I've mastered, being able to put myself in that place where I can crush and go make it happen. And you probably have too, to a large extent. But now some of us listening to this need strategy coaches, need someone looking over those numbers and giving us that advice. And so that's definitely my next hire, if you will, to go about doing that. So anyway, all that is to say is enjoy, share this episode. Please, would you do me a favor and just give us a 5-star review on whatever platform you're listening to this? That would mean a lot and would help us get this word out to more people. God bless you. I love you. Talk soon.